Right, let's try again. Yeah, I'm Keith Naylor, almost in the second year, where Steve's already explained. The current module we're doing is called Not Knowing, which scared the hell out of me when I first started it, because I like to have sort of things quite planned in my life, and when things get out of kilt, it does my head in a bit. So a little bit of background as well would sort of help, is that I've obviously come to find out quite latish on. It's something I missed out from doing at school, and something I always regret not doing at school. And I've taken the opportunity to do it sort of later on in life, and I'm absolutely loving it. And we have our ups and downs, etc. Apart from here, I'm also heavily involved in a group called Subley Community Greenhouses, which helps people with well-being and mental health issues. And I have my own little studio up there. That's become sort of fundamental to my practice. One of the key areas for me is in the value of art, it's in the communication and the socialisation almost that occurs through art. Those connections rather than necessarily an end object, and it's to do with the actual process of creating the actual making bit. That's when I get the most value at a personal level, when I'm just lost in making stuff. And I've tried to reflect that in some of the art that I'm doing. I wanted to take, in the first year, one of the areas that I'd never done before coming here was to do with cyanotypes. We had a short workshop on that. I fell in love with it, and I spent the rest of the year making cyanotypes, ending up some really large scale ones. These are ones I actually rejected from the exhibition. This was a series of 4. Well, that's from last year, so I shouldn't really be talking about that. So this year, not knowing, I'd had enough of cyanotypes. I wanted something completely new. And Ian, as you all know over the other side, he just showed me the laser engraving machine over there, and I became interested. He showed me a couple of things. And it was from that point I thought, yeah, this is something completely new. It matches a brief of not knowing, no idea what it can do. And therefore I've taken the lead from that and thrown myself into that. The main problem that I initially found was the time aspect, because with the laser engraving machine you've got to have a staff member there all the time. Now that doesn't suit me unless I had a staff member there every day and including weekends. So after about 4 weeks I decided I've got to buy my own machine. So I've invested in that. Big expense, but I think worthwhile. Because one of the main things I feel that when you're doing any art, it doesn't matter the medium, it is the process and mastering that process that elevates your art. And it can be quite repetitive. This is just a personal thing. As with my cyanotypes, I did hundreds of experiments. I mean, literally hundreds. 50% of them didn't work. And it can be incredibly, but each one I learned a little bit more to inform the next piece. Just adjust this, try that. And I've adopted that same sort of approach with laser engraving. Again, I have no idea to set it up, no idea what materials could be used. So this term, I initially thought, right, I'm just going to look at what types of materials can be used on it. So, although I've ended up doing quite a lot, as you'll see around here, on acrylic, I've also experimented on composite aluminium. Got some there on leather. I've done wood. I've done ceramic tiles.
Can we pass one round, Keith?
Yeah, you can pass some of these round if you like. I mean, actually, that's not a bad one, because this is literally, I think, the first 2 I did, and they were awful. Well, I didn't like them. One of the main things that was wrong with that is that you've got to invert the image, and it's actually a negative. But I've recorded each of those and all the settings, so each time I'd sort of making notes down what went wrong and what went well. I mean, that one I thought that came out, that's just on aluminium. which came out very clear, but the heat of it started to warp the aluminium sheet. You can see in the corner there's a bit of a flex to it now. This is actually a particular favourite of mine, though it's not everybody, but that's actually on plaster. It's on if you keep it within the sort of frame. Oh, I've done it on, what else? I've done it on slate, different types of tiles, painted tiles, leather, as I said, wood. But each time it is this it's getting, for me, it's getting to know your material and mastering. If it's like anybody who's done just well, not say simple drawing, but drawing or oil paints, it's that repetition of practice, I think, that elevates the work. I mean, I could have just come in straight away and done one. In fact, I got incredibly lucky. In fact, one of the first pieces I did was this, which came out. This is the wrong thing with that, was that it should have been, I took off the backing. The whole idea of it was that it was meant to be a reflective piece, where you saw yourself, the image of the person, co-created within the actual piece. And it was this, a lot of my work is philosophically based, and it's phenomenology, and it's to do with the co-creation and meaning between the artist and the viewer. But again, I made a mistake on that. I can rectify it, I can paint the back white. Just some just, I want to put that somewhere safe. Some of the other pieces that I've moved on, because a lot of this is just purely experimental bits. Some that I've moved on to a sort of next level was a piece up here. I mentioned earlier that I'm involved in a project that helps people with mental health and well-being. I have my own mental health journey, as does everybody. I've had quite a severe journey. I've been in and out of being sectioned all my adult life. And I do hear, when I'm really ill, I get auditory hallucinations. So I hear people whispering behind me that aren't there. And that's the reason by this image, is that I found that art calms down my manic phase of being bipolar, and that can help me dismiss these auditory hallucinations. Hence, this is why I'm in charge. I'm telling them to be quiet. The other piece that I'm developing at the moment is the one along the back here. Again, I haven't mentioned the jester figure, have I told you? It's the elephant in the room. What are you doing dressed like that, Keith? I'll come on to that. I was going to see if anybody noticed. I just normally get dressed. The one along the back is called I Am Not a Number, and it starts off as a later engraving, but quite a photorealistic one. And I've progressively moved along. I've substituted the image with numbers, where the numbers actually start making the image, but gradually those get subsumed, if you like, completely. The image goes into the numbers, and the last one, and I don't know how quite to display this, and any suggestions are welcome, but I'm looking to actually do cutouts where the actual numbers then start literally falling out of the piece, and you end up with just a pile of cut out plastic numbers at the end. Nice, cheery, optimistic piece like most. There's one other piece that I'd really like to do based around this. Can just pass that round. Those were again just initial experimental one. I've got access to another cheery subject. It's Auschwitz prison guards at the concentration camp. There is a database with images of them. What I'm interested in is how we interpret images from the limited information that we get in a purely visual sense. So what I've done there is completely isolated the prison uniform from them, so it's literally their eyes or that section of the face. So there's no clue initially to the audience that this was a concentration guard at Auschwitz. My intention, I'd like to do a large scale piece of this, because there are hundreds of these images, but you've got to refine each one. And I'd like to make it into almost stripes, reflecting the prison camp, the striped pyjamas are sometimes called, of the inmates. But I'd also like to leave a couple of those tiles completely reflective, so that you see yourself in that one reflected tile. Because what I want to make people think is, what would I have done in that situation? And I think it's contemporary, because we've now in a world where authoritarianism in many countries is expressing itself, and it's very topical even now to say what am I doing about that. So that's the other piece that I'm contemplating for possibly the end of the year exhibition. And the jester outfit.
Yes.
I do a lot of research into philosophy and aesthetics. And one of the first ones I came across was looking at Plato and Aristotle, in particular Aristotle. He's written extensively in what's called the Poetics in Book 1 on the nature of tragedy in art, what is missing and has never been found. And that book has influenced practically all of Western art development. What is missing is the second book, which was the comedies. And that got me really interested in what is the role of comedy or humour in art, be it visual arts or performance or whatever. And also how I use humour, and that's why that is to do with my mental health, because I use, and probably any of you, well, you all have a mental health journey, but a lot of us will use humour to cover up or just to make a laugh at something that's quite serious, and that really sort of interests me. So it's sort of a bit tied together. So that's the I am not a number, but that actually is the numbers of the alphabet, which spell out, actually it spells out Keith, which is my name. The stars, I don't know if people are aware, the most famous, infamous is obviously with the Jewish inmates. They had a yellow star, or actually just a yellow triangle put on them. But there were other inmates at the concentration camps, and I was looking at what would apply to me. And the two are, one is a red, which is to do, I might get these the wrong way around, I apologise. One is to do with being a political prisoner, because I would be pretty much completely, outspoken against that, or like to think I would. And the other is people with mental health. They were also inmates, just purely on the grounds that they had mental health issues. So that's why I've included that on my particular costume. I think that's covered. More things. Any questions?
You know the one with the eyes that we're just looking at here? And you said you're going to leave a blank tile.
Yeah, these were just purely two sort of experimental ones, and what I can manage to get, because that's a more, I've taken the image, I've used AI healing, one of the photography things, to improve them more photorealistic, and then that is actually a negative of the original. And the reason, then I started thinking that, well, that gives that sort of like grey, whitish grey, and that would give a black, and I could line those up in, say, 200 of them.
Yeah,
So it'd get the stripe, yeah.
Like, as I was displaying, you're seeing the room in columns, and you're going to leave a blank one, so that you become part of your artwork.
Yeah.
Where the number on your chest says keep, could you not put yourself into your artwork by putting your number as if it was a war number, like used to have the numbers on, didn't they?
Yes, oh yes.
You could replicate so that that's in your work, but you become part of your work in a roundabout way.
Yeah, one of the others that I'm looking at, but I don't think I'll have time to do, is actually, I'd like to do one of the plaster-based ones, and if I find the right one. But it's wearing this, but that is the image I'd like to produce. Again, that's got there's quite a bit of philosophical and theoretical stuff behind this. In particular, it's to do with idealism and realism. There's a famous painting by Raphael called The School of Athens, where it has Plato and Aristotle arguing right at the centre. Plato is pointing up towards the heavens, because he's an idealist and a rationalist. He thinks art is divinely given. He actually doesn't like art very much at all. He thinks most art should be got rid of. Whereas Aristotle, he's more of an empiricist, he's much more worldly, and he's pointing down to the earth. And that was meant to represent, to some degree, replicate that I'm struggling with my own philosophy, trying to work out what is, I think, is the metaphysics of the world and other issues. There's a further one image of this where I'm actually wearing a ball and chain, because I've been researching phenomenology and how that we are bound to ourselves and bound to the earth. So that was going to go in there. So that's another one, but that would also have details and try to get those in. Yeah. I don't know if I'll get round to manage to do that though. Any other questions? I can do some juggling if it helps.
I know you're really at the moment thinking about the I'm not a number piece. How fixed are you with it being like a cross? Could it be viewed down?
It could, yeah. I mean, I've contemplated, looked at different ones. I haven't looked at one actually going just completely vertically. It's a possibility. I mean, I looked at it as potentially a panelled one, so say 4x4, and then with the bottom right being the bit that starts to crumble out, because it'd be actually, you cut through it like that.
Yeah,
so I only did that as a testing, but what I'd like to do is make that even more crumbly. That's just a test run to see if this laser will do it, and it does it really well, and to obliterate that. So there's a possibility. It's not something I've resolved at the moment. The other idea I've had is having it on a floating shelf, and as it crumbles at the end, the pieces of the numbers sort of fall out onto the shelf. Possibly, I'd like it to go onto the floor, but people, they're only tiny.
You could maybe suspend.
That's the other I thought. Putting so they're not that heavy. I'd probably have to put a little lead weight or something at the end of one of them on individual ones falling. But yeah, it's. I'm not knowing at the moment. I'm not saying I know yet because I'm not meant to be not knowing.
If those are all cut out like that, what about if you put light behind it and so the dots, what you've cut out, are on the wall, so then that becomes the shadow?
That's a possibility. It'd have to be then, because what I want it to be is some solid. It would work if it possibly in a sort of corridor type setting where you could get a projection onto the wall opposite, but I don't think you could do it across a crowded gallery. You know, you couldn't do it just from here to there or anything. The main thing is that we're having to start now to think, because about our end of year exhibition and what space we've got. That's why we've got a floor plan there now. We've got our venue. It's at the prison. So we're all sort of thinking, how can I start to display that work? I mean, I've got a certain amount of wall space to play with.
Well, we're working on that, Keith.
What?
We're working on that, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
What have you found out about yourself, Keith, while you've been doing this, not knowing? Have you found out about the kind of artist you are, and you're still trying to work that out?
I think mine will always be just experimental stuff. I mean, you know, I arrived here as, you know, the main bits I've done is some reasonable drawing in charcoal and, you know, hand on any painting. I was determined to do some painting when I arrived here. I got a whole load of oil paints, still not opened them, not done a single painting. I think you gradually get a confidence in the not knowing, because it scared the hell out of me. I mean, when I first went into fire, I nearly walked out after the first lesson. Nearly ran home. I was in a panic attack. Yeah, and I thought, what the hell is going on here? I just want to do a bit of drawing, please. Just give me some crayons. But it's that having belief in yourself, and it is that repetition of process. It's going through that. You know, I had no idea what I was going to do, and I've come up with this at the end, and you think, I've done it once. And you'll get to moments of, well, I do, complete despair. But just keep going. But I think that experimenting stuff and knowing and it sometimes seems to me to get lost is the craft of what you're doing, of mastering that. No matter what it is, whether it be knitting, whether it be oil painting, whether it be pottery, making films, it's learning about all those little elements. I mean, behind this, you know, I've had to learn 4 different computer programs, which I'm not a techie, but I've gone into them and recorded and find out how to do things, because that's part of the craft, because that's getting me to know what the limits are and what can be done and what can be changed. It's not sufficient to pass that on to somebody else, and there is a big debate in art about sort of outsourcing stuff. And I'm not entirely against that, but I've got much deeper respect for an artist who's done it themselves, or at least mastered that thing, and said, yeah, I can do this, I can do it entirely myself, I'm a bit short of time. Can you produce me some prints of that? But I think mastering that process and going through a repetition, I mean, the word for art, the technique, was a craft. It was a craft of the skill and ability to do something, and it extended well beyond what we narrow form of what we call visual arts now. It extended to debating. It went to dinner parties, landscape design, but it was that attention and that skill and that almost attention to the
Keith, don't
process.
start landscape designing, because you'll end up with a big digger and everything.
Well, I did my seashells. I did get a ton bag. Oh God, now I've got caught up. A ton bag of cockle shells, and I did in fact, wasn't even my final piece. Was it? No. Yeah, and I did a huge. What's it called? Maze. No, it's not. What's the word? But a maze, basically. And it was about 5 meters wide by 5 meters. I did a whole exhibition, a mini exhibition up at a place called Stubby Lee. Yeah, that's anything else.
Right.
Yes.
With your I'm not a number one,
With the
I'm not a number,
yeah.
have you ever thought about reversing it? So you start off as the number, because you're saying I'm not a number, and then coming down into...
I did, and that was my initial thought. But what I do a lot of philosophical and theoretical research, and what I'm looking at the moment is basically positive determinism, and it's pretty hard science, a deterministic view of the world, and it's making me despair, because I've gone into it thinking I've got complete free will, I'm a free agent, all my art is something that I'm an agent for and I created. And the more and more I'm researching on this, the more and more I'm becoming to think, no, there's less and less of what is me left. And that's part of this reflection of this, is a reflection of that theoretical journey that I'm going. That's something I'm probably going to extend into the 3rd year, because in my major area, possibly for dissertation, would be neuroaesthetics, where you're looking at what's happening inside the human body, inside the neurons and the neural networks, when we are doing and when we are viewing art. But it goes against my whole worldview. Because I like to think we are completely sort of free agents.
Yeah, determinism will drive you absolutely insane.
It is dark.
Yeah. The first time I like encountered it, I was like, "But this is the end. This is the end of it. I can't like."
Well, yeah.
I just had to I had to utterly.
It's all right. I've got a good stock of meds. a good support network.
No, I've got nervous. But I think what's
It'll just be a performance piece, me jumping out the window. I was deterministic. I had to. I had no free will.
that ability that you've embraced of like not knowing, and because like knowing you through like foundation now, it's like you need to know, but you're actually functioning not knowing, and you've got this variety of ideas. You've got like so many that are coming through, and I think the one that you had about the eyes and then leaving them blank, so that the audience then engage in that, because that's quite apparent in quite a few of the pieces, like the red perspex ones that you've got there.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, that is about bringing in that viewer to like question like themselves.
It is. I mean, that red perspex, that was deliberately chosen. It stemmed from our trip to Berlin, and it was in one gallery. It was a Gerhard Richter exhibition, which was fantastic. But there was one piece which was just purely a dark red, that dark red, colour of perspex on the wall. And I'd photographed most other things, and I was trying to photograph, and I was like, I can't photograph this. And then it was only really afterwards that I realised that the whole point of that one piece was the reflection of yourself within that material. And that gave me, took that idea through into co-constituting in the phenomenological sense, the sort of gesture image that we've all got that within us. But that will mean something slightly different to you, slightly different to you, slightly different to you. Yeah.
When you talk about determinism, do you mean like determinism in psychology or determinism in philosophy?
It's both.
Both?
It's both. I mean, what to say, not being superior, but philosophical ideas tend to sit above other practices and then feed into those. So you'll have a positive determinism as a philosophical position, just argued on its point in time, but that will inform approaches to any other study of anything. That's not very well sort of explained. Perhaps the easiest one is sort of empiricism, which is it's an ontology that sort of says that everything that we derive of truth is via our senses at the most basic. But it's also that lays down the foundation of modern science, because it's all about observation and recording. Whereas, for example, rationalism is much more idealistic, and that is the most, I think, therefore I am. But that everything that you can be certain of, your senses can be deceived, so you can basically ignore them. Or you can be certain of things that you can think of in your mind and come to a logical conclusion of. Mathematics tends to be the most obvious one. But determinism, it is, it does filter through into psychology. Because there's a whole debate on whether you can actually, if you take the hard positive deterministic model, which is a hard scientific model, it's basically backed by science, is that there is nothing you can consciously do to intervene with, for example, in psychology, if you had a drug addict. Similarly, that a criminal is not actually responsible for what they've done. It has massive implications. And it all flows from this idea that everything follows the conditions immediately before it. So that what happened there was that was determined by what I did there, but that was determined by what I did just a moment ago, and what I was determined was when I set off and worked at home. What was determined when I was born, and even going back further than that.
There must be a strand of philosophy that counters all of this.
Yes.
The non-deterministic or whatever.
Yeah, funnily enough, and that's why, I think that's why I did, I'm a bit of a girlish one. I wrote over the summer a 12,000 word essay on, towards the phenomenology of aesthetics, because I wanted, phenomenology and existentialism is almost a counter to it, because it bases it almost doesn't matter that it is your personal experience, particularly on an existential level, that matters the most. So that's why I looked at that first. I don't know, perhaps as a buffer to prepare myself to look at this other.
Well, you don't know, you might circle back.
I might circle back. Yeah, I'm at that point of not knowing at the moment. I hope I do.
What's next, Keith? For you've got the stuff there, but in terms of like the outfit, but what's next for that?
For the outfit,
Yeah.
I'm not sure at the moment. There was a performance piece I wanted to do wearing it, but it was not actually really integral to wearing it. It was, and that's to do with, well, I can't really say it because you might be the guinea pigs. So there is a performance piece that I would, but I think it was, I was also sort of interested in it sort of from that the initial thing, but also reading Jung's archetypes. I remember talking to somebody, it must be, because she was a student, but it was about Jung's archetypes, and she was asking which we thought we fitted, and she actually thought I was a creative. Well, no, sorry, I thought I'm probably on the creative side, because I was working in planning and urban design at the time, and she said, no, you're the jester type. And the jester type, and it's, I'm not a massive fan of Jung, but I do like this visual history, this shared visual history that seems to pan humankind, where we have these archetypes in different cultures. And that is important in art when we're talking about symbolism and semiotics and how we sort of portray a message. So that's part of the reason I ended up with this, because it's not just about humour, it's about chaos. And you're looking at you've got, was it Seth in Egypt, you've got Hermes, who's the messenger between gods, sounds a bit grand, but he was sort of somewhere in between idealism and realism, which I talked about before. And you've got some Viking and Norse culture, you've got Loki, and he's much more of a trickster figure, and then taking it right the way forward, you've got the jester and Batman.
Any more questions while we're on camera?
Are you going to have any like sound on stage before you move?
That's a real interesting. That one I have no intention to. This one, I've talked to Paul already about that, and my initial intention was yes, because what I wanted to have is, when I get, I'm very open about it, when I get auditory hallucinations, it's normally when I'm in a pretty bad state, quite often manic, dressed up as a jester, doing that thing, but I start hearing this whispering sound. People are having a conversation, but it sounds like you've been paranoid. You've heard somebody in the playground whispering about you behind you, sort of thing. That's what it sounds like. It's always negative, you only catch odd words. Like, things like it's not good enough. You never do that, never succeed. So I was thinking of having that, getting it to be performed, and it's always women, funnily enough. There were always, must be something psychological in that as well. But to perform that as a series of whispers, and then sort of try and have that, it'd have to be in the earphones, but to link that to that one. So yes, on that one. That could work over the top as well, because it is. I manage my mental health. I still have these problems. They're not going to go away, but I manage them now and I'm much more aware of them. And you know, when I hear these, it normally takes me a few seconds. Oh God, it's them. Shut up. You know, and they'll stop. You know, but I quite like the idea. That's a possibility, because that echoes my art, and my art conquering or subduing bad elements of my mental health.
I don't think you should put the sound in that.
Huh?
I don't think you should put the sound in that. I think the sound could serve as a separate piece. That, I think you're right. You could be in danger of like revealing too much on it. Because I quite like the idea of the sound can be played around, like if it could be next to it, but like with like headphones you put, so then you're at one with the sound, just like you are. And I think that personally, I think would be more powerful and stronger, and because that works like on its own like that.
Yeah. I'll have to think about that. Anything else? Oh, thank you for all
Thank
coming.
you.
Just to go back then, just focus a little bit on how it is like presented, because I know you're going to be exhibiting this year in it, and it will like help in terms of that. It's like the number sequence. It's like we spoke about that being like in like a grid or in like a line, and then we spoke about the numbers. How integral to it is it that the numbers visually need to be seen as falling off?
Not. I'd quite like the idea of them to show that it's even if it's just on. The idea where I'm up to at the moment that most appeals to me is there's a floating shelf about that wide, having these displayed at almost like a concertina book type thing. Yeah, and then the last one's in that book. It's you know, it's all, you know, the last page might be, it's only that bit standing up, and this bit is all completely disintegrated into piles of numbers, and even odd numbers out still here, but doing a sort of progression. But I'd have to mop that up and see if it works. Sometimes you think that, and then when you do it, you go, now it'll shine. Yeah. back to scheme one.
Could you not do it where you do your concertina thing, but all the bits that you've cut out of it represent the numbers and leave them in a big pile on the floor?
Yeah, I thought about the floor. The only thing about it, because they're tiny, they'll blow. If you open a door, the gust from that would be enough to, because they're so fine.
Or in a clear cube of some sort, so that
Certainly you'll get knocked over. What I thought about was possibly doing a separate lower shelf on the wall, a smaller one at the end where they're falling onto. So one main shelf and then one slightly further down, just really so they don't get kicked all over a gallery.
I like that idea.
What?
Of them being picked all
Oh yeah. I'll bring in a ton bag of cockle shells and you can have a play. Empty that out into the gallery.
Have you got any plans for the cockle shells?
They all got reused. That's one of the reasons I used them. Because it was literally a full, from a builder's yard, a full ton bag of cockle shells, which I then had to clean because they stank. So, which I never took into account until like, you know, God, these really do stink. As I mentioned, the project I work is called Stubberley Community Greenhouses. We do a lot of growing up there. All the cockle shells would then use as mulch. They're fantastic for keeping away slugs and snails, crushed cockle shell, or as drainage. So the entire lot got used. It wasn't. I don't still have it in the corner of my lounge.
Yeah.
Right, do you want another one?
Uh-huh.
Right, do you want some?
No, I'm just
Ah.
maybe they could be incorporated in some way. Not sure. Oh, yeah, no, that's great, Keith.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. Yeah, really.